Um, Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to today's panel discussion. Thank you all for joining with us. I'm Chaturika Hansamali, and I'll be moderating today's session. As we all know, over the past few years, we have experienced significant fluctuations in exchange rate, which reflects both domestic economic challenges as well as developments in the global economy. And more recently, rising geopolitical tensions, disruptions to the global trade routes, uncertainty in energy markets, and shifts in international capital flows have once again highlighted the vulnerability of small open economies like Sri Lanka to external shocks. And this currency depreciation has influenced almost every aspect of the economy, from government finances and debt servicing to tourism, and then exports, businesses, and household welfare. While a weaker currency can create opportunities to export competitiveness and tourism earnings, it also increases important concerns like inflation, debt repayment, import costs, and the overall cost of living. And against backdrop of growing global uncertainty, understanding the causes, consequences, and policy implications of currency depreciation has become increasingly important for our economic future. So, today's discussion is based on currency depreciation and Sri Lankan economy, economic impacts, policy responses, and future directions. Our main objective is to better understand the economic consequences of currency depreciation, explore its effects across different sectors, and discuss practical policy responses which can help Sri Lanka move forward. We are fortunate to have a distinguished panel of experts with us today. Let me briefly introduce our panelists. First of all, we have Senior Professor K. Amrithalingam, Head of the Department of Economics, Faculty of Arts, University of Colombo. He will share insights on public finance and government intervention. And then we have Senior Professor S.P. Premaratne from Department of Economics, University of Colombo, who will focus on the implications for small and medium enterprises. And also we have Professor Suranga Silva, again from Department of Economics, University of Colombo. He will discuss about the tourism sector. And also we have Dr. Ravindra Kumaran from University of Vavuniya, and he will provide perspectives on economic growth. And also we have Dr. Achintya Koswatta from Open University of Sri Lanka, and she will discuss about debt repayment and external debt management. Just a quick note on how this will work. We will have 2 rounds of discussion. In each round, I'll ask a question, and each panelist will have about 3 minutes to answer. I'll be keeping an eye on the time to make sure we cover everything. And before we begin our discussion, we will have a brief presentation by Mr. Kanishka Veeravalla from Department of Economics, University of Colombo, and he will share some key findings and recent trends related to currency depreciation in Sri Lanka based on the recent research done by our Professor Premaratne and Mr. Kanishka Veeravalla. Thank you all for being here again. And to start us off, I would like to invite Mr. Kanishka Veeravalla to deliver his presentation. Kanishka, it's over to you.
Thank you, Chaturika. Hope I'm audible enough. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, Kanishka, yes.
Okay. Hello everyone. I'm Kanishka Veeravalla. So I'm presenting study that I developed with Senior Professor S.P. Premaratne. So thank you very much for being here today. The title of our presentation is From Depreciation to Inflation, Macroeconomic Transmission During Sri Lanka's Crisis. vector autoregressive approach. This is an ongoing working paper, and I want to emphasize at the beginning that this analysis is still at a foundation level. So the purpose of today is not to claim defensive causal conclusions, but to present preliminary evidence on how exchange rate depreciation may have transmitted through inflation, growth, interest rates, and small and medium enterprises credit conditions in Sri Lanka. Moving on, let me begin with the motivation. So Sri Lanka's 2022 economic crisis was accompanied by a sharp depreciation of Sri Lankan rupee, as we all know. So at the same time, the country experienced high inflation, weak economic growth, and tighter credit conditions. So in theory, depreciation can work in two ways. In traditional view, is that depreciation can help an economy by improving export competitiveness. On the other hand, import-dependent economy, depreciation can also raise the domestic price of fuel, food, intermediate inputs, and also capital goods. So the key question is whether depreciation was expansionary or contractionary in the context of Sri Lanka. So moving to data and empirical strategy, to examine this particular question that I just described, we use quarterly data from first quarter of 2010 to fourth quarter of 2025. The main variables are exchange rate depreciation, inflation, GDP growth, interest rate, and SME credit growth. The empirical strategy is based on vector autoregressive, or normally we call it as VAR model. The intuition behind using VAR model is basically these macroeconomic variables move together and influence one another over time. So rather than imposing a single one-way relationship, the VAR allows us to trace dynamic interactions among the variables. We also included post-2022 crisis dummy to account for the structural shift during the crisis period. The main tool used are impulse response functions, forecast error variance decomposition. We are moving to descriptive statistics. The left graph, as you can see, shows the movement of exchange rate measured.
Mr. Kanishka, I'm afraid you are not share in the, if you have some, maybe mistakenly.
Can't you see my slides?
Others, I don't know, I can't see.
No, we couldn't.
I'm sorry. I thought I shared my.
You shared, but I lost it. Thanks. Now.
Can you
see now? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so we are moving to the descriptive statistics. The left-hand graph, as you can see, shows the movement of exchange rate measured as Sri Lankan rupees per US dollars. The right-hand graph, on the other hand, shows the quarterly depreciation. So the key point is very clear here. As we all can clearly observe, the 2022 crisis generated an exceptional depreciation shock. So compared to previous years, so this was not a normal fluctuation. It was a major macroeconomic shock. So the rest of the analysis asks, once this shock happened, how did the economy respond? Then this is about macroeconomic development during the crisis, main macroeconomic variables. As we can see, inflation increased sharply, 2022 reaching about 30%. GDP growth turned negative during the crisis period, and SME credit growth also deteriorated substantially. And on the other hand, interest rates increased, but less dramatically if you compare that with the inflation. So the descriptive picture already suggested a possible sequence, that depreciation, then the inflation, then weaker growth and weaker credit conditions. The VAR analysis formally examined this transmission mechanism. Also, as a robustness, the debt to GDP ratio increased sharply after 2022 crisis. So this increase reflects several overlapping pressures: economic contraction, exchange rate depreciation, fiscal stress, likewise. So the reason for considering debt is that the crisis was not only an exchange rate crisis, it was linked to fiscal and debt vulnerabilities. So including debt dynamics helps check whether the main results are simply capturing fiscal stress. So we are moving to the baseline vector autoregressive results. So this table presents the baseline results. So I will not go through every coefficient. Instead, I want to highlight three key messages actually. So first, the lag depreciation has a positive and statistically significant association with inflation. Second, inflation is, we can say, persistent. Once inflation increases, it tends to remain elevated throughout the time. Third, inflation has a negative association with both GDP growth and also the SME credit growth. So this suggests that inflation may be the key transmission mechanism. In other words, depreciation affects inflation first, and inflation then affects the real economy and the credit conditions. So we are moving to impulse response function. So this is one of the most important slides in my presentation. The impulse response function shows what happens after depreciation shock. So you can think of this as asking if the economy experiences a, let's say, a depreciation shock today, how do inflation and GDP growth, interest rates, and SME credit respond over time? So the results are very intuitive. Inflation rises immediately and remains persistently positive, as you can see. And GDP growth declines following the shock. SME credit growth contracts, suggesting tighter financial conditions. And interest rates respond only very weakly. So overall evidence suggests that depreciation was mainly inflationary and contractionary in the context of Sri Lanka. The next question is, how important are depreciation shocks? So the forecast error variance decomposition helps answer this particular question. So it shows how much of variation in each macroeconomic variable can explain by depreciation shocks. So the results suggest that depreciation shocks explain around 35 to 40% of inflation fluctuations. They explain around 1/3 of GDP growth fluctuations. They also explain around 1/4 of SME credit growth fluctuations. So exchange rate shocks are not just background noise. So they appear to be central source of macroeconomic volatility during this period. This slide summarizes the economic mechanism. The story is not simply that depreciation directly reduces growth. The mechanism is more indirect, actually. The depreciation increases the domestic cost of imports, as we all can expect. For Sri Lanka, this matters because the economy depends heavily on import fuel, heavily on heavily on intermediate goods, heavily on capital goods. So this creates inflationary pressure. So higher inflation then weakens purchasing power and rises the production cost. At the same time, the credit contraction tightens, especially for small and medium enterprises. So the core transmission mechanism is depreciation leads to inflation, and inflation then affects growth and credit. So the findings suggest that a traditional competitiveness channel appears weak in this context, the cost push inflation channel seems to dominate. So this is important because depreciation is sometimes treated as a standard adjustment mechanism, but during crisis conditions, especially in an import dependent economy like in Sri Lanka, depreciation may amplify this economic stress. On the other hand, SMEs are particularly vulnerable because they depend heavily on credit and have limited capacity to absorb cost shocks. So the broader argument is that depreciation during a crisis can weaken growth and private sector credit through inflationary pressure. As the conclusion and policy implications, main findings: the first, depreciation generates persistent inflationary pressure. Second, inflation reduces GDP growth. Third, what we can say is inflation weakens SME credit growth. Fourth, exchange rate shocks explain a large share of macroeconomic volatility. The policy implication is that exchange rate stability is important for inflation management. Monetary policy alone may not be enough if the economy remains highly dependent on imported essentials and production inputs. Reducing import dependence and protecting SME credit access during crisis are also important. However, these findings should be interpreted cautiously. This is still a working paper, and the VAR framework identifies dynamic relationships, not very strong causal effects. The sample size is relatively small, and the 2022 crisis was an extraordinary structural event. So these results should be understood as preliminary evidence and foundation for further research. These are some of the selected references. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kanishka. That was very useful overview, and it has given us a strong foundation for today's discussion. So thanks again. Let us now move to our first round, where we focus on understanding economic impacts of currency depreciation. In this round, I would like each panelist to help us understand how currency depreciation affects the economy from their area of expertise. So let me begin with Senior Professor K. Amrithalingam. Sir, when we look at Sri Lanka's recent experience with currency depreciation, what do you see as the most significant implications for government finances as well as the broader economy?
Thank you, Shatrika, for having me on this forum. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
but
Okay, thank you. As Shatrika pointed out at the beginning, I focus heavily on public finance perspective. When we see the forex management under flexible exchange rate, inflow or an outflow of forex will determine the exchange rate of Sri Lankan rupee. Inflow mean that is supply. Inflow just when we export more and more goods and services, that is supply of forex. Then when we import more and more goods and services, that is demand. So as you are aware, our imports are very much high, and exports are very much low. In addition to that, towards supply side, tourist income, remittances, and FDI also will contribute. But overall, the supply of forex is less, demand is very high, so you can't prevent the depreciation of Sri Lankan rupee. Then what's happening? Government borrows heavily from external sources to stabilize the Sri Lankan rupee. So when you see the data for 2025, due to the overwhelming borrowing, the interest payment alone 46% as a percentage of total expenditure. Amortization also more than 16%. So when Sri Lanka spend 100 rupees, per 100 rupees, more than 60 rupees gone for debt service. So this has created a debt overhang. What do you mean by debt overhang? Due to the focus on debt service, the focus on critical sectors, including infrastructure, economic infrastructure, then education, health, R&D, and technology development. These areas are not under priority list in Sri Lanka. That means simply we are delaying the development process. So how we are getting Forex 3 T's and 1 R? 3 T's mean tea, textile, and tourism. These all three are labor-intensive industry. And 1 R, that is remittances, again labor-intensive industry. Sri Lanka is a welfare country, providing free education to all for more than 80 years. And where is the connection between education and the development? Our education is not giving us much needed Forex because Sri Lanka could not diversify production and exports. So see the experience of South Korea. That country was behind to Ceylon in 1960s. Then see Thailand, see Vietnam, see Costa Rica. These all countries have diversified their export structure, but Sri Lanka could not do so. So then you have to borrow continuously because you can't increase the inflow of Forex. The Sri Lankan currency always will be under stress. So to avoid the stress, to ensure the stability, Sri Lanka borrowing. For how long we are going to borrow? Then you can't prevent debt overhang. Then you are delaying the development process. So to break the vicious cycle, Sri Lanka should take a U-turn. U-turn means diversification of exports. You have to bring more and more dollar. You have to minimize the outflow. These are the initial remarks, Chatrika. We will continue the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So it's clear that the depreciation is not only an exchange rate issue, it also creates important fiscal challenges for the government as well. Thanks again, sir. Then let's move on to Senior Professor Premaratna. Sir, how has currency depreciation affected small and medium enterprises in Sri Lanka? And what are the key challenges businesses are facing today?
Thank you very much, Chaturika, for this introduction. The Kanishka already given. With that, we noticed that the channel is clear. Now, if you see here, the depreciation, the lead the prices of imports items increase, and the cost of production increase, the inflation increase, the interest increase, then investment cost out at the end, growth reduce and growth slow down. So our calculation just shows, and the result, for example, the currency depreciation happened last few months and about, let's say, 10%. So the quarterly, how the inflation is affected to the increase the each quarter, you can see is up to go 5.8% per quarter, the highest. And if this happen, if government or central bank or does not take any action. The growth rate also clear, the slowdown and the quarterly and the fourth quarter is into the minus 2.4. The SME sector, that's what you asked me, that is also negatively affect reasons, mainly the SME sector. If you take out the labor inputs, about 80% or 80% inputs are imported. So directly affect to negatively, and that again affect to the growth, our calculation. So the other, and also the contribution to the growth overall. So this shock, depreciation shock, you can see the highest contribution direct 34% through exchange rate, and also the SME credit shock 15%. With that, I will just to briefly mention how the SME sector affect, mainly the negatively affected. And one channel is the side shock. Like I mentioned clearly, imported raw material. So that is a key thing. So this compulsory imported raw material we imported semi-sector. So that, and also the energy cost also increase, the depreciation, that also affect to the semi-sector. And also, if you look at we saw that Kanishka's presentation, inflation, that also the SME sector affect different way. One thing, the supply side and the demand side, that is also the other. And the second point, the financial constraint, that's also the negatively affect to the SME sector because the high interest rate. And you saw that the last week central bank increased the policy rate also. That maybe the result of the depreciation central bank tried to address. I don't know whether the really the long term and the medium term is work. And the bank also may increase the risk premium, and collateral constraint also come into the SME sector. And the other thing, the market. Now, when you look at the market demand side, the SME sector in the domestic demand also wind up reduce due to high inflation and some not compulsory type of SME product. And also the advantage is if some SMEs linked to the export market. So that's encouragement, even though I can say this medium term and the short term, that's kind of encouragement we can say. At the end, I would try to emphasize the demand side, like I mentioned, though is negatively affect to the domestic demand, and the export-oriented SMEs may better off with this depreciation, at least short term. But the point here, SME sector mainly depend on not the local inputs, imported inputs. With that, though the export-led SMEs benefit short term, maybe medium and the long term as negative. Thank you very much, Oti.
Thank you very much, sir, for your valuable insights. Then let's move on to Dr. Ravindra Kumaran. Sir, from an economic growth perspective, how do you assess the impact of currency depreciation on Sri Lanka's overall economic performance?
Thank you, Satrika. Is it here, Satrika?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay. So first of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the organizer for inviting me to participate in this panel discussion. As you know, everyone, this exchange rate depreciation continues to be a critical issue for the Sri Lankan economy. The most recently, between April and June 2026, the Sri Lankan rupee experienced noticeable depreciation against the major currencies. Particularly when you look at the US dollar, the exchange rate moved from around 316 rupees per dollar in early April to nearly 343 rupees per dollar in late May before stabilizing in early June. The similar depreciation was observed against the British pound, euro, and Australian dollar. This recent episode reflects the vulnerability of Sri Lanka's external sector to global economic uncertainties, geopolitical tension, and foreign exchange market pressure. While depreciation raises concern regarding inflation, already some of our panelists discussed, and import cost, and again, economic stability, it can also improve export competitiveness and support external sector adjustment. Therefore, the key question is whether depreciation ultimately hinders or support economic growth and external balance in Sri Lanka. So when you answer your question, Satrika, the impact of currency depreciation on economic growth in Sri Lanka differ significantly between the short run and the medium term. In the short run, the depreciation tends to have a contractionary effect on economic growth because Sri Lanka remains heavily dependent on imports. Particularly, everyone we know, essential imports such as fuel, pharmaceuticals, machinery, industrial raw materials, and certain food items become more expensive when the rupee depreciates. For example, during the recent depreciation between April and May 2026, the rupee weakened from approximately 306 rupees per US dollar to nearly 343 rupees per dollar. This increase in exchange rate immediately raises import costs for businesses and also consumers. Higher import costs translate into higher production costs, of course, increased transportation expenses, and inflationary pressure throughout the economy. In the meantime, the household face higher living costs, the reducing purchasing power and consumption. On the other hand, look, the businesses experience declining profit margins and may postpone investment decisions because of uncertainty regarding future exchange rate movement. Therefore, in the short run, depreciation can slow economic growth through inflation, reduced consumption, and lower investment. However, the medium-term effects may be more positive. A weaker rupee makes Sri Lankan export relatively cheaper in international market. Export-oriented sectors such as apparel, tea, rubber products, spices, particularly IT service, and also tourism can become the more competitive because of the depreciation. Therefore, foreign buyers can purchase Sri Lankan products at lower prices in foreign currency terms, potentially increasing export demand. And another most important sector is tourism. Tourism is another important channel for Sri Lanka. When the rupee depreciates, Sri Lanka becomes more affordable destination for international tourists, which can increase tourism receipt and foreign exchange earnings. Furthermore, depreciation may encourage import substitution, where consumers and firms shift from imported products towards locally produced alternatives, which is stimulating domestic production and employment. However, these medium-term benefits depends on whether Sri Lanka has sufficient export capacity, productivity improvement, and investor confidence. The depreciation alone cannot generate sustainable growth unless it is supported by structural reforms and export diversification, as Professor mentioned previously. Therefore, my assessment is that the recent depreciation may create short-term economic pressure through inflation and higher costs. But if managed properly, it can contribute to medium-term growth by improving competitiveness and strengthening foreign exchange earnings. In Sri Lanka, exchange rate depreciation initially acts as a cost shock, but over time, it can become a competitiveness enhancing mechanism that support growth and external sector recovery. So once again, thank you, Chaturika. I can meet the next round. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, sir. So that helps us understand how exchange rate movements influence overall economic performance. So then let's move on to Dr. Achintya Koswatta. Ma'am, from the perspective of debt repayment and external debt management, how has the currency depreciation affected our debt servicing obligations and the financial sector, and also the repayment capacity of borrowers in both public and private sectors?
Thanks, Chaturika. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, miss.
Okay. Thanks once again for the question. So I think Professor Amitalingam and Professor Premaratne have already highlighted important points regarding how currency depreciation affects things like government expenditure and SMEs, particularly through higher fuel prices and import costs. And also, Dr. Ravi explained the broader implications for growth and the external sector. So I would like to look at this issue from the perspective of debt repayment and external debt management, as you explained. So before I begin, I would like to briefly reflect on the depreciation shock that Sri Lanka experienced very recently, because as we are all aware that it was largely due to the higher oil prices and geopolitical tensions in the Middle East. So when we talk about this, something very interesting about the current situation is that this depreciation is somewhat different from what we experienced during the economic crisis a few years ago. Why I say it is because at that crisis time, the depreciation was mainly the result of domestic issues, things like reserve shortages and debt-related concerns. But this time, a significant part of the pressure is coming from external developments. So I would say the source of the shock may be different, but from a debt management perspective, the consequences are actually quite similar. So when we discuss external debt, one point that we usually misunderstand is that the debt itself does not increase in dollar terms when the rupee depreciates. But the issue here is that we need more rupees to obtain those dollars. So debt servicing here becomes more expensive from the government's perspective because government revenue is collected mainly in rupees, while external debt obligations have to be settled in foreign currency. So the debt may be remain the same, but the burden of the repayment become heavier. And on the other hand, the private sector also experiences significant pressure. Many firms depend on imported fuel, imported raw materials, or foreign currency financing. So when the exchange rate depreciates, so production costs will increase. Then naturally, this pressure moves into the financial sector if businesses and households face repayment difficulties. As a result, banks become exposed to higher credit risk. So what begins as an exchange rate issue can gradually become a financial sector issue as well. So I think the main issue is not simply whether the rupee depreciates. The serious issue here is whether our government, businesses, and financial institutions are resilient enough to absorb that depreciation without creating further financial stress. So those are some of my observations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Miss, for your insights. Then let's move on to Professor Suranga Silva. Sir, as we know, the currency depreciation is often viewed as both an opportunity and a challenge for tourism sector. From your perspective, how has the tourism sector been affected?
Thank you very much, Chaturika. I'm audible for you or not?
Yes, sir. Can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. At this crisis, Sri Lankans are putting huge expectation on tourism industry. But tourism industry is like a double-sword edge because you can see that tourism industry is putting the high expectation at the same time tourism industry is so vulnerable when the depreciation is happening. One example is, as you know, that Marshall-Lerner condition, when you look at the elasticity pessimism, this kind of depreciation would affect for Sri Lanka tourism in both ways. One is there's optimistic view is weaker rupees make a Sri Lankan cheaper destinations and causing an explosive surge in foreign booking. The other side, pessimistic view is it really structural bottlenecks. We know that Sri Lanka has huge structural bottlenecks because of the prevailing the crisis coming from since decades. There's a huge peak cost and the global travel habit mean to numbers. But we have experienced right now the paradox situation. That is, tourist arrival increase, but the tourism income decrease. This has happened when you compare to 2018 and 2025. Even though we were able to make a record break in tourist arrival, which increased the highest number of tourist arrival in Sri Lanka since its history. It was earlier 2018, 2.3 million, but this time we got 2.33 million tourists. So therefore, we were very happy about the numbers. But when you look at the tourism income, it is very unfortunate situation. The reason was we had 4.3 billion tourists, 4 billion to US dollar income in 2018. But on 2025, we got only 3.7 billion US dollars. So therefore, we have a paradox situation that is actually how we can solve this situation. This situation has been aggravated because of the depreciation of the currency. As theoretically, we know that when we reduce the price of the product, international level, demand would increase. But it didn't happen because of 2, 3 reasons. One reason is Sri Lanka is providing a sameness product. So therefore, when we are providing the unique product, very exclusive product, then the price sensitivity is very less. But here what is happening, and we reduce the price of Sri Lanka tourism for foreigners to buy in terms of the local rupees. But on the other side, we can see the cost push situation because structural bottlenecks. US dollar, though we actually experienced that rupees are depreciation against the US dollar, but the cost of production of the tourism industry is increasing because of we have rigid supply side import dependencies. Example, when you look at energy and utility cost, air condition, gas transport, and at the same time, the high import leakages of Sri Lanka tourism, food and other items. Therefore, we would not be able to get the best possible benefit after depreciation of rupees against the dollar, assuming that when we reduce the price, there will be a large number of tourists, but unfortunately, the supply side, they couldn't get that best possible benefit because cost of production is very high. So when we look at the situation now, Sri Lanka tourism is to need to find out the new paradigm shift. That is actually rather than focusing on sameness product, we have to find out the very unique, very exclusive type of tourism product now, which we can see in some other countries compared to destinations against Sri Lanka. We would like to discuss that one in detail for the next discussion, but I would like to say, yes, depreciation theoretically would be good for tourism industry if tourist arrival increase because of the local price for tourism products are decreasing. Then tourists are getting more income in Sri Lankan rupees for the same dollar. But when they come to Sri Lanka, they realize the real value of that money. The real value of that money is decreasing faster than the increase in the rupees against the dollar. That is actually some sort of money illusions for the tourists. So therefore, they realize that still Sri Lanka is going to be an expensive destinations. Sometimes it can be reproof destinations. Why? Because the cost of production of all the services are increasing because we are dependent on the imports product. That is the problem we are facing right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your perspectives. So now we have come to the end of round one. Thank you to all our panelists. Let us now move to the second round and focus on policy responses and future directions. Let me begin with Dr. Ravindra Kumaran. Sir, can you briefly explain what kind of policy measures are needed to ensure that the currency depreciation contributes to the sustainable economic growth rather than becoming a source of economic vulnerability?
Thank you, Chandrika. It's a really very good question. As I mentioned earlier, depreciation can improve competitiveness and create opportunities for economic growth. However, these benefits are not automatic. If depreciation is not supported by appropriate policies, it may simply result in inflation and higher living costs without generating sustainable growth. Therefore, I believe four complementary policies are particularly important for Sri Lanka. The first one, maintaining macroeconomic stability is essential if currency depreciation is to support sustainable economic growth. A competitive exchange rate can support export, but businesses will only invest and expand if they have confidence in economic policies. The 2022 crisis clearly demonstrated that depreciation alone is not sufficient. Although the rupee became more competitive, inflation exceeded 70% at one stage, eroding purchasing power and increasing production cost. More recently, the rupee depreciated from 316 rupees to 343 rupees. If inflation raises alongside depreciation, the competitiveness gains can quickly disappear. Therefore, fiscal discipline, inflation control, debt sustainability, and a credible monetary policy framework are essential to ensure that depreciation translates into sustainable economic growth rather than simply higher prices and economic uncertainty. When you move the second policy, strengthening the export sector is critical if Sri Lanka is to fully benefit from competitive exchange rate. This is a very, very important the policy strength. A weaker exchange rate can make Sri Lankan products more competitive internationally, but depreciation alone does not guarantee export growth. Firms must have the capacity to increase production, meet international quality standards, and access global market. When you look at the Sri Lanka's export, it has remained concentrated in a few sectors such as apparel and tea, which limits our ability to fully benefit from exchange rate adjustment. Therefore, exporters need better access to finance, technology, skilled labor, logistics, and market intelligence. At the same time, improving productivity and reducing rate costs are essential. A competitive exchange rate creates the opportunity, but a strong export sector is what converts the opportunity into sustainable growth and foreign exchange earning. So when you move on the third policy direction, attracting foreign direct investment is essential for transforming exchange rate competitiveness into sustainable economic growth. A competitive exchange rate can make Sri Lanka an attractive location for international investors because production costs become relatively lower in foreign currency terms. However, FDI brings much more than capital. It provides technology transfer, management expertise, innovation, and access to global value chain. Countries such as Vietnam and Bangladesh have successfully used FDI to expand export and accelerate industrial transformation. So from this experience, Sri Lanka should focus on attracting investment into export-oriented manufacturing, information technology, renewable energy, logistics, and value-added agriculture. However, investors require policy consistency, macroeconomic stability, and a predictable business environment. Therefore, attracting FDI is not simply an investment policy. It is a critical strategy for converting exchange rate competitiveness into long-term economic growth and export diversification. When you move on the last policy action, improving infrastructure and institutional efficiency is essential for converting exchange rate competitiveness into sustainable express growth and economic development. As we know that a competitive exchange rate can make export cheaper, but exporters also need efficient ports, transport systems, custom procedure, and digital services. When you look at Sri Lanka benefits from its strategic location and the port of Colombo. Yet, the businesses still face logistical cost and administrative delays that reduce competitiveness. If logistic costs remain high, the advantages created by depreciation can quickly disappear. Therefore, continue investment in infrastructure, rate facilitation, digitalization, and regulatory reform is essential. So, sustainable competitiveness is not determined only by the exchange rate. It also depends on how efficiently goods, services, and information move through the economy. So when I summarize the old policies, a competitive exchange rate opens the door to growth, but macroeconomic stability, export capacity, foreign investment, and institutional efficiency determine whether Sri Lanka can work through the door. So in Sri Lanka case, depreciation should be viewed as a window of opportunity. The real challenge is implementing complementary reform that allow business to take advantage of that opportunity. Therefore, sustainable growth depends not only on exchange rate movement, but also on sound macroeconomic management, investment, export promotion, and structural reforms. Thank you very much, Chaturika. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable insights. Let's move on to Dr. Achintya Koswatha. Ma'am, what kind of debt management strategies should Sri Lanka adopt to reduce exchange rate risk and to strengthen external debt sustainability and also maintain access to international financing in the future?
Thanks again for the question, Chaturika. Again, I think our panelists have already highlighted many important points from various perspectives. Whether we look at government finances, tourism, or SME sector, here I see one common message emerges very clearly. That message is that Sri Lanka remains vulnerable to external shocks. So, from a debt management perspective, I would like to focus on how we can reduce that vulnerability when we are going forward. So when we talk about this issue in the current context, one interesting lesson we can learn from the recent depreciation is that even when domestic economic conditions improve, external developments can still create significant pressures. So given all these circumstances, I would say the objective of debt management is not to eliminate risk, because we know that eliminating risk is impossible, but the real objective is to reduce vulnerability and build resilience. So the question then becomes, how do we actually do that? I think the first thing we need to focus on is reducing excessive exposure to foreign currency risk. At the same time, we have to recognize that Sri Lanka will continue to borrow from international markets and development partners. I think that is a normal part of economic development in many other developing countries, including Sri Lanka. But what really matters is the composition of that borrowing. So over the long term, I think we need a better balance between foreign currency debt and domestic currency debt. And my second point is the quality of borrowings. So when it comes to borrowings, the issue is whether the borrowings create the ability to repay. So for an example, if external borrowing supports exports, tourism, renewable energy, maybe technology-based industries and other foreign exchange generating activities, then those investments can create future income streams that support debt repayment. So in that way, that becomes much more sustainable. So borrowing should not simply finance expenditure, borrowing should create repayment capacity. And my final point is credibility. So if you look at recent IMF assessments as well as uh, other international recognized reports, one message comes through very clearly. That is, investors and international lenders do not look only at debt ratios. They also look at policy consistency, transparency, and commitment to reform. So credibility itself becomes a sort of economic asset. So it takes years to build, but it can be lost very quickly. So after considering all these issues, I think there is one important lesson we have to learn. So the lesson is Sri Lanka cannot control external shocks, but what we can control is how prepared we are as a small open economy. So with that, I would like to conclude my comments. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am, for your clear explanation. Thanks again. Then let's move on to Professor Suranga Silva. Sir, looking ahead, how can Sri Lanka better leverage the tourism sector to generate foreign exchange, and then strengthen economic resilience? And also, what kind of policy measures can help the tourism sector contribute more effectively to economic recovery and foreign reserve accumulation?
Thank you very much, Chaturika. I think we have to find out the counteract elasticity pessimisms. Actually, we are right now practicing that one. We actually experience such situations. How we can maximize the net revenue during the depreciation of Sri Lanka rupees. Policy measures must shift away from the merely chasing high visitor volumes. Instead of, we have to actually focus on the most valuable toward protecting the hotel operating margin from import-driven inflations and increase the local value add for tourists. That is the best policy. So when you look at the overall picture, now we have seen that our competitive destination like Malaysia, Thailand, they actually during this depreciation time they are actually getting some benefit because they are because of their local market and they are more domestic oriented product development. So therefore, we would like to see how we can create the supply side policies, insulating the local operators from the cost. And example, because of Sri Lanka tourism model, it's highly import dependent. When compared with Thailand and Malaysia, and falling rupees rapidly inflate operational expenditure. Therefore, policies must be focused on reducing this reliance on imports. For that one, decentralized green economy subsidies and net example, we can say that introducing new product based on more inclusive and domestic resource driven tourism development. Example, we can say that wellness tourism. Now, example, wellness tourism, when you look at the import leakages of general tourism, it is around 45% to 50%. But when you look at some kind of tourism like wellness, the community tourism, and ecotourism, then at the same time, we can promote some religious tourism, which are not that much of popular among the tour operators or the traditional business people because they are used to promote the sameness product to promote Sri Lanka. But here I think that we need to think about new type of tourism development, new types of destination introductions, and we should find out the the strategies to enhance the lesson on places of Sri Lanka. The most important factor is demand side policies. Breaking the sticky dollar barrier, we have to actually, it's very important. As you know that the dominant currency pricing quoting the US dollar, it is sometimes problematic because when we see when Russian tourists are coming, as we have experienced earlier, they are not supposed to do the businesses with their currencies. Therefore, they have to use some other method to exchange their their money to buy some product from Sri Lanka. They have to use either US dollars or euro. So therefore, there are some kind of policy indications or measures we have to ensure that this sticky dollar issue, the barrier must be removed. For that one, we have to find out some kind of strategies to create more quality driven and diversified tourism product. We call heterogeneous tourism product in Sri Lanka by capitalizing the competitive and comparative advantage. Now, example, you see now tourism industry cannot be developed through through capitalizing the economies of scale because no tourist is coming to buy the same product for everywhere. So they would like to have new experience. They would like to see get some new experience when they come to Sri Lanka when we go to different provinces like Northern Province, Eastern Province, Central Province, they would like to see the diversity. Therefore, tourism industry, you cannot capitalize economies of scale, but they have to capitalize economies of scope. So therefore, the other important factor is the very dangerous hidden factor is because of the depreciation of the currency, the hospitality brain drain and migrations are very high because the people, those who work in Sri Lanka as the tourism employees, they would like to go abroad because they are they can get more money in Sri Lanka rupee terms when they go abroad. Therefore, this is not only for the demand side, this is the supply side. This is actually not only for the product side. This is actually extend to the labor aspect as well. So therefore, this is we have to find out the multi-dimensional aspect to solve this problem. Therefore, it is very important to look at rather than one-sided approach, we have to see different multidimensional approach to solve this problem. The most important key strategy we have to use diversification of tourism product and minimizing import dependent tourism development and make some incentive to prevent brain drain, mitigation, mitigation taxes incentive like this. The government should take some kind of very effective and very useful policy measures. This is a very important aspect to be highlighted. Thank you very much, Chaturika, for giving this opportunity. I think we have to do some research. What is the net benefit of depreciation of rupees in Sri Lanka too? That is one of the key area we have to do together to understand the net impact of depreciation of Sri Lanka rupees. At the same time, the policy implication on this particular area. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your valuable ideas. Then let me ask a question from Professor Amir. Sir, what policy priorities should the government focus on to minimize the adverse effects of currency depreciation while supporting long-term economic recovery?
Thank you, Chatrika, again. So our problem largely based on our forex earning. That is the experience of many countries. Continuously, we experience trade deficit. See other countries. It may be South Korea earlier, now Vietnam, Thailand, Costa Rica, and many countries. On and off, they experience trade deficit also, but largely, including China, they experience trade surplus. That means they generate more forex. But Sri Lanka continuously for decades, except 2-3 years after we regain independence, for decades, Sri Lanka continued to experience trade deficit. So we need to export more and more goods and services. Otherwise, you have to export people. No country became developed by exporting people. Now we are exporting people. So we have to export more goods and services because Sri Lankan rupee terms borrowing, you can increase tax. At least you can print Sri Lankan rupee and repay the domestic loan. But external borrowing, you can't print dollar. What is happening in Sri Lanka is borrowing and repaying the loan. This is not for 1 year or 2 years, for decades. So that's why I'm saying you have to take a U-turn. Another tragedy, Sri Lanka borrowed and invested on unproductive areas. Those projects are not giving us revenue, but you have to repay the loan. These are odious debt. Odious debt means people are not willing to go for that type of investment, but government leaders invested heavily on unproductive area. So what are the options? You have to follow some of the East Asian countries' experience. So we have to bring more dollar. That is our major problem for a long period of time. For that, we need to go for a full-fledged diversification. See, Vietnam liberalized the economy in 1990, late comer. Sri Lanka liberalized in 1977. After liberalization, Sri Lanka diversified from plantation crops to textile industry, but after 1977, no further diversification. Still, we are paying for that. So you have to minimize the borrowing. For that, you have to increase the forex inflow. So this is the experience of many countries in the world. Sri Lanka should follow that path. Then you can reduce borrowing. You can invest more and more here on productive area, including education, including R&D, including technology development. Otherwise, continuously you have to export labor-intensive goods. These are very cheap. Tea, 2,000, 3,000 kilo. Textile, maybe 4,000, 5,000. But we are importing a lot of expensive items. Fuel, petroleum you can't avoid because we don't have petroleum. But what about laptop, smartphone, automobile? To import one laptop, how many tea you have to, how many kilos of tea you have to export? How many t-shirts you have to export? So that is the tragedy. So we have to go for a full-fledged diversification like other countries. Then you can minimize borrowing. You can focus on the development. Thank you, Shatrika, again.
Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable insights. Then let's move on to Senior Professor Premaratna. Sir, as an expertise in the area of small and medium enterprises, can you explain what practical measures can help small and medium enterprises adapt to exchange rate volatility and take advantage of new opportunities created by more competitive currency?
Right. Thank you very much, Chatrika. I think the message is very clear. Like everybody talk about look like this the same thing, and we have to look at the supply side issues and proper business environment, enabling business environment. I think we talk about this over and over, years and years and decade, but still there. I don't know why policymakers can understand or can't take the decision. And the isolate policy also may not work, of course, definitely not work. For example, take the central bank, some policies, it's not work, has to do together policy mix, I think, in the overall look at. And if you focus on SME, the SME is the, whatever you talk about tourism, whatever you talk about other sectors, SME is the key. Unfortunately, the SME sectors like the other welfare-oriented and the government supported always. So that this kind of a external shock situation immediately, short term, may need a kind of a support, but selected, not a kind of a random or overall support selected. What I mean the selected mean leading industries, and we live in the fifth industrial revolution, AI, and the related growth driven with this global sectors. And we have to look at the short term also kind of a import subsidy because this is the import inputs are the main thing, and much thing we have to look at the long term. That is the structural barriers and creating enabling business environment. For that, we have to, I think, everybody talk about the new sectors. We have to talk about not the tea, and the Professor Amirthalingam say that how many tea kilos we have to import for one laptop. I think that's we have to think of that. And also the energy, also using one of the key cost side is the energy. Still, we depend on the petrol and the gas, those energy and the renewable alternative energies. Sri Lanka has the good opportunities, and the logistic side SMEs also we have to look at. Though what we focus on the tourism related, tourism also mainly the SME led tourism sector we have. So the improving the external business environment is the key. With that, we need the kind of, we have to build the resilience through the value chain. And the value chain, we have to focus in the local input value chain. For that, problem is the quality. Again, when you look at the problem quality, we have to look at the external business environment, whether we have quality. The diversity export, because it's all about the depreciation, export, and import. And we always have the deficit and not the surplus. We have to think of the like SME linked to the large export firms and that kind of network development. And those has to sit, the government policymakers has to look at clearly rather than immediate kind of a cheap decision, in the sense the political benefit decision. So the message is again clear. So all the sectors, what you talk about the other experts here, and clear message, internal development required. This policy paper, what the economics department will publish, the policy paper number 26 is available online. And based on the today discussion, will we improve it, and then everybody can get online, and also the department printed version also. Chatrika, once again, thank you very much. And another last point also, and we did not talk about here the poverty, though that is a very important area. And the poverty, when you talk about the poverty and the depreciation, of course, through inflations and other areas, definitely the negatively effect. And the government only mechanism to address those things, increase tax those who work, tax. That's negatively affect. Several times we discussed negatively affect economic growth and SMEs, that also. And also the government has to think of the proper social protection system rather than giving everything like a free and subsidies, and development-oriented policies required at this point, and the export-oriented. With that, thank you very much again. Chatrika, over to you. Maybe the audience also waiting some point and inputs. Right? We have a stream people there also, I can see. Chatrika, over to you.
Thank you very much, sir. So we have come to the end of round 2 as well. We now have some time for questions or for sharing thoughts from the audience. So the floor is open to the audience now.
Okay, let me ask one question. I'm Shashi from the Colombo University, Department of Economics. Hello?
Yes, we can hear
We
you.
can hear you.
Right. I would like to know the effectiveness of IMF-backed reforms being addressed in addressing the underlying causes of rupee depreciation. Did you all get my question?
Yes, we got your question. Who should answer that question? And somebody has to IMF answer that question. Anyone, audience also aware of the really this IMF side?
Sasi, this is 17 IMF bailout package. I remember 3 episodes. 2001, we experienced crisis. Sri Lankan economy registered a negative growth rate. IMF came in. Then, Sri Lanka increased tax revenue. Then after IMF left, the tax revenue came down. Then 2015 also, same thing happened. There was a regime change. IMF came. 2001 value-added tax was introduced abruptly. Then 2015 also again tax increase. After that there was a regime change. Then 2022 also we experienced massive crisis. IMF came in, again tax massive increase. Then now we are under IMF program. So this is 17 one. Even after 17 bailout packages, still we could not stabilize the economy. So India, 1991, IMF came in. After that, as far as I remember, no IMF. But here, even after 17 times, we experience some sort of economic stability. So we have to identify our own problem. IMF intervention will not resolve our long-lasting problem. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I think I have opinion also. Like you say, Professor Amithalingam says, we are in trap. Of course, the no option. That's why the IMF came. And like said, the IMF intervention, no, I mean years and years, they get no resolve the issues. The tax is not the I mean good solution. Though we pay high tax, and what the IMF said, they compare to the other European countries, other countries we pay is less. But the thing is, those countries, the tax, though pay, they get the benefit, taxpayers. But in Sri Lanka, it's a different story. I think that I agree also, Professor.
True.
I also want to add very important thing that beyond Professor Premaratna's statement. I think this is a essential punishment for Sri Lankan mismanagement of public money and specifically for the loans. So this has been because we cannot evade the condition making by the IMF because our mismanagement of foreign loans have become the key reasons. The bad thing is the mismanagement of foreign currencies has actually created the platform to the IMF to enter our economy. But the punishment is taken by the punishment needs to be borne by us. That is why reason. That is why we are paying 36% of our total income as a tax. But I think that is actually the problem we are facing. Otherwise, this is the essential punishment for Sri Lankans to handle their own internal macroeconomic policies to ensure that economic growth and development of the country.
I'm sorry, Professor Suranga, I think the tax what we paid, 36% only direct tax. If you include the indirect tax, we paid even like middle income level, about 72% of our earning we pay direct and indirect tax. So that's the worst case in that one.
But
Also,
the
sorry to
people,
disturb.
those who actually made that all the corruption and mismanagements are in heaven without any problem, right?
And also, I wanted to add something. The IMF repeated emphasized that Sri Lanka should maintain a flexible market-determined exchange rate rather than artificially defending the rupee with foreign reserve. According to the IMF, the exchange rate should act as a shock absorber when the country faces external pressure, such as high oil prices or lower tourism earnings or global economic uncertainty. Particularly in May 2026, IMF mission very clearly state that the currency is meant to be the first line of defense in terms of external shocks. So they also noted that rupee's flexibility has been a useful adjustment mechanism and that Sri Lanka should continue following the prudent monetary policy while allowing exchange rate flexibility. So particularly they are concentrate on the flexible and market determined exchange rate is more suitable for the Sri Lankan whenever Sri Lanka face any kind of risk situation. Thank you.
I'm Sumanadasa from the Sri Lanka Economic Association. I think you hear me clearly. My point is we have not done enough to restructure our economy, particularly starting from the very inefficient public sector, which has to help so much for the engine of growth, the private sector. So starting from the public service, all the other land, labor, foreign trade, all the structural reforms are yet to be done. So I think if we can do something seriously about these factors, then we can make this an opportunity to make the internal sector more active towards export-led growth. I think this is where we can do our own strategies where we have failed. Thank you.
Can I make some observation? Priyanka,
Why not? Right? Why not? Go.
I think the impact of currency depreciation on economy, whether we benefit through that or not, mainly we discuss theoretically with the use of Marshall-Lerner condition, and few studies have been done in the context of Sri Lanka. Generally, to benefit from currency depreciation, we have to have the import and price elasticity of imports and exports in absolute terms should be greater than 1. So the few studies that have been done in the context of Sri Lanka clearly indicate it is less than 1. So which means that currency depreciation does not help the economy in terms of more foreign exchange earnings. So to address that, the way forward, as our speakers mentioned, we have to basically diversify the export, basically get into high value and quality exports in particular. With that, that is one way. Other way is to basically look for import substitutions wherever possible to reduce at least some of the imports, whether we can reduce some of the imports at least. Third one is to improve the capacity, supply capacity. Supply side issues we have to address, as Dr. Sumanadasa mentioned. We have to now, you can basically take up the IMF, but if you look at the fifth objective of the IMF program, it clearly indicates that fifth objective to make sure that we implement growth enhancing structural reforms. Now, some of those reforms contain, and the document was presented to the Parliament and parliamentary approval received in 2024, I think August, Economic Transformation Bill, which basically focus on some of the key areas such as the foreign investment-led export growth and enhancing productivity in the economy, and also the female labor force participation, and in particular to manage the economy with certain conditions while meeting certain conditions. Now, we need to look at to what extent such reforms have been taken place in addressing such structural weaknesses in the economy, as very clearly mentioned, in the area of labor, in the area of land, in the area of, if you look at the trade and investment environment, to what extent we have undertaken, or we have taken up such reforms in order to improve the competitiveness of our economy, is something that we really need to look at. I think depending on some of those, waiting till some number of people going abroad to earn few dollars, or waiting till some foreign tourists come into Sri Lanka to receive some dollars. I mean, this strategy we have to, we have to really think, and we need to, while tapping those revenue sources, we really need to focus on export growth based on the foreign direct investments. Unless we address those structural issues, whatever the stability that we gain will be short, only in the short term. We cannot think of macroeconomic stability without growth. Now that what has happened is actually what we have witnessed is that you cannot keep this loan, and if you want to keep, you can keep it at a lower equilibrium level. Now what we have done, we have taken certain measures which basically lead to slow down our economy. While whenever the growth take place, we know that import intensity, the what we call the growth will increase the importation, and that will lead to some pressure on the balance of payment. This is what we have historically witnessed. We are still moving ahead with this self-killing growth path, where whenever the growth take place, then that will increase imports, then the balance of payment pressure. To address the balance of payment pressure, you raise the interest rates, then the interest rates kill the investment, and that will again, whatever the growth that is killed by itself. So this element is always there. So unless we are ready to go for structural reforms, I mean, this is the tragedy. Whether there is a issue in the Middle East or not, we would have witnessed this for sure with the enhancement in the growth process. So we all understand this, but implementation remain very. Thank you.
I am Rahul
We-
Senanayanka. I would like to ask question from Professor Amrutalinga. Professor, now if we fail from from these IMF solutions, and while we exhausting this program in the country, then what would be the solution actually?
Okay, very good question. Because we approach IMF again and again to sort out our balance of payment issues. That's what I'm saying. This is our problem. We have created. We delay the diversification. Continuously, we are experiencing trade deficit. These are our problem. So IMF will not resolve these important issues. IMF will not talk about export diversification of our export market. So we need to identify our issue. We have to resolve. Otherwise, again and again, we have to go to IMF. Now, without IMF, World Bank will not support you. ADB will not support you. So our total export revenue is not sufficient to repay foreign loan. That is the situation right now. So that's what I'm again and again saying. We have to find solution because we have created. These are self-inflicted problem. So if we fail to identify our core issues, then again and again we have to go to IMF. Then IMF will come, say 2001, 2015, 2022. IMF is coming, we are adjusting. After IMF, same situation, again and again. So what is the solution then? So we have to follow some of the East Asian countries' experience. I'm not talking about Japan. I'm not talking about America, Canada, UK. I'm talking about Thailand. We are unable to talk about South Korea. I'm talking about Vietnam. I'm talking about Costa Rica. So we need to see the experience. Go to our airport, full of migrant laborers and tourists. Go to San Jose Airport of Costa Rica, a lot of tourists. But when you come out from the airport, everywhere blue chip companies. We are unable to bring FDI. Because our saving is low, our investment is low. Desperately, we need FDI. We are unable to bring FDI. Thailand, successful country. Vietnam, successful country in bringing FDI. So we need to find out our issue. Then we need to address our issues. IMF may be short-term solution, but we are depending on IMF for a long period of time. That is not a solution. Thank you. Very good question.
Good evening. Can I talk, sir? Hello?
Yes, Chandra Kumar.
Yeah, Canada. Thank you for the opportunity. I think my professor, Professor Amling, sir, my teacher, and also Dr. Ravindran, sir, and my friend Ajindya. Okay, you are already discussing very
You're
good
joined from
topic.
Hyderabad?
Yeah, right now in Hyderabad, I'm doing the PhD. I think, yeah, very good. Because this is a hot topic, I think, in India also. I would like to act more something about, you already discussed about the what is the depreciation of our currency and against the dollar. But we have to think what went wrong in Sri Lanka. Because Sri Lanka, the political wise, they won the election but lost the economy. So like that in India also winning the election, losing the economy, but India very strong compared with the Sri Lanka. Because why? What are the things? Point outly, we fail in the institutionalized. Institutional why we didn't reach after the 1977. I think the liberalization didn't reach in the each and every corner of the country because some industry are only located in Colombo, not other places. We missed that was. Another one is the digitalizing. So now the current, now only we are thinking about, but already now I'm right now staying in the Telangana is the digitalized state. This is one of the very promote, I think, establish the digital economy, the transparency. I think in the roadside also, there are small medium entrepreneurs also, they are using the digital currency transformation. There's no any other cash. One or two places they are using, but we missed. Now only we introduced that one. Another one is agriculture things. Agriculture also we missed because after the 1960, I think the Green Revolution, we enjoy the whole fertilizer, chemical, everything, but we all imported. Why? But we didn't export in the rice. Still, we have the major ground level problem per capita production of the land. So these all things are led to the financial crisis. Another very important things, the energy also. Energy you also highlighted. Why we didn't change in the renewable energy. In our I'm sitting in the Telangana. Here we are using the solar energy. I think that one is still they are providing the supply of the many places in the most of the private sector and government sector as well. These all things are they are making the investment. But other things more important now they are India also highlighting the Viksit Bharat 2040. Each and every citizen 1.5 billion population in India, but even though they are making the investment mind development in the small children also they are thinking about the countries would come like this in future. What now we should do investment in the future mindset for the people. Then only we can sort it out all problem. This current issue, this started from the political wise, not a people wise. Our government, Soba government, borrowing money, but there's no any single troop earning dollar from outside of the country. But we all utilize. Now we can see the all whatever the investigation is going on. These all things are led this economic crisis. Now current government also they are recovering the economy, even though last year that Ditwa cyclone happened. Now the external shock, that one is a very east. I think the America and Iran war. This also making the more difficulty our country. Currency depreciation, appreciation depend on our export. We missed another one, very important, foreign direct investment. This is very important to we can resolve our money. We no need to print money if we introduce the digital economy. These are the things should be considered in future Sri Lanka to develop. This is my thoughts. Thank you so much. If anything wrong, please clarify my teachers.
Thank you, Chandramma. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for those insightful questions and for sharing your thoughts. I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to all our panelists for sharing their expertise and valuable insights. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. And have a pleasant evening, and we look forward to seeing you at future discussions. Thanks again.
Chandrika,
Thank you
thank
very
you
much.
all.